Welcome back to the Armchair Coaching Podcast. I am your host, Coach Sheffer, and today we have a special guest. Finally on the podcast, we get Coach Joe Mullinax, who is the head coach and defensive coordinator for Brentsville District High School in Nokesville, Virginia. He is my boss and my
Come
friend.
on. Boss, really? I try to not be that guy. I mean, every once in a while I have to be that guy, but I try not to be.
Well, I mean, you've certainly put a little bit of faith in me, so.
No, I appreciate that. You were you were relatively easy to hire. One, because there was only, one person that was interested in the position. I've always been told in my career that you can't hire Vince Lombardi if he doesn't apply. So,
Well, I've actually told the story of the day that you interviewed me the first time a couple times on the podcast, and I was sitting there
yeah.
thinking, I was like, man, you put me on the board, and I don't remember what I drew up, but I'm sure I made a fool of myself.
No, you did fine. I did put you on the board. I do that with everybody that I interview
Mm-hmm.
and talk to. I think, even if it's not the way that I would do something, and I know, having listened to your show in the past and to the guys that you've had on, everybody does things different. Football is one of those things where it's literally a different language everywhere you go. My version of English might have a different vernacular in another part of the country. We might run the same scheme. We might do the same things the same way, just say it in a different fashion. And that's pretty much what you did. The main focus for me in interviews when I put people on the board is, are they able to articulate what they're trying to do? I've told people in the past, if you're a good teacher, I can make you a coach. I can teach you football, which is essentially, I gave you a book and said, read this. And that's pretty much how I taught myself defense. I know we'll talk about, my journey a little bit, but, I had some good mentors along the way, but about 75% of what I taught myself about defensive football, it was me. It was me reading, me watching videos, and I pretty much did the exact same thing to you. I helped you in spots, but a vast majority of your learning defensively came at your own pace and your own direction, and you did a good job as you were a linebackers coach. So.
Yeah, I'll admit I was a little disgruntled to be a defensive coach for a little while, but
Yes, you were.
I
It was
definitely
very
got over
clear.
it. I got
I
over
just
it
ignored
quickly.
it.
Yeah, you did. Some days you did.
That's
All
fair.
right. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. And this first question is one that I ask all the coaches that come on the podcast because I'm weirdly interested in everybody's story. Every coach seems to have their own unique journey, their own unique path to where they are today. So could you kind of take some time to go over your football playing career and your coaching journey? Basically, how did you end up where you are now?
Sure. Well, I started playing football when I was 13 years old, and it was also when I was 13 years old that I knew that I wanted to be a football coach. As weird as that sounds, my grandfather was a coach in the area where we are now in Prince William County. Eugene Mullinax was his name, and he was a coach at Marsteller Middle School for 30 plus years. The award there, athletics award, is named after him now, and it's kind of cool on a side note that I've coached two Mullinax Award winners here at Brentsville. That's kind of a nice full circle thing with my grandfather. But he was the original Coach Mullinax. He inspired me to want to be a coach. And, I realized very quickly that football was going to be my sport and not basketball. Basketball was my first love. It was the thing that I played all through my childhood. My dad wouldn't let me play football because he refereed as his side hustle. He refereed Little League games, and he saw how those parents were. He saw how violent it could be. I was always big. When I was 12 years old, I was 290 pounds, or a little bit less than that, about 250 when I was 12. But I got up to 290 by the time I was 13 and 14. So the weight limit stuff, I never would have been able to play anyway. So he didn't want to put me and my brother through that. So we started playing when we were in middle school. And I actually didn't make my middle school team when I was in sixth grade. I was 12 years old. I didn't make the team. And I was very upset because it was my first chance to play football. And my dad and my grandpa said, this isn't going to happen to you again. We're going to, you need to get in shape, because I was a roly-poly. I was. You need to get in shape. You need to start working out and lifting. And I would go up there with my dad, and I'd work out, and I'd work out with my grandpa. And, I got into better shape. And then starting in middle school, I played offensive line. That's the position I played my entire career almost, give or take a rep or two on the defensive line. I went to Stonewall Jackson High School in Manassas, Virginia, now Unity Reed High School. And I played football there for Jim Powell, who coached my dad for 25 years. He was a coach at Stonewall, and his last year, I was a sophomore, and he coached me. And then I was coached by Lauren Johnson, who's the head coach at Highland Springs High School now, one of the greatest coaches in Virginia high school football history, multiple state championships at this point. His first head coaching job was coaching at my school, coaching me my junior, senior year, and then I think a year or two after that. And he worked with talented guys like Chris Garrett, Ryan Williams, who went on to Virginia Tech and had a hell of a career. But my sophomore year, we went 0-10. And then by my senior year, we went 9-3, I think was our final record. And we won the district championship, made the regional final. So he helped turn our program around. I went and played college football at Randolph-Macon College in Ashland, Virginia. And I chose that school almost exclusively for the coach, Pedro Aruza, who's still the coach there at Macon. I knew I wanted to be a coach, and I knew that he was the kind of coach that I wanted to be like. I knew that I had a chance to play at Macon. That was the secondary thing. But I knew going into the process what I wanted my career to be. And I learned a lot from Coach Aruza in my 4 years there, things to do in a program, the importance of character, the importance of discipline. And a lot of it was reinforcing what I learned from my grandfather all those years prior in conversations with him as a teenager. So I spent my 4 years at Macon. I played sporadically. I didn't play a ton. I was never a starter. I would get in. I was too deep, basically, my entire career. And then I get out of college and I go into coaching. Again, that's what I've wanted to do this whole time. I had a chance to work at Lee Davis High School. I think it's Mechanicsville High School now. I work at a bunch of schools that their names got changed recently. But it was Lee Davis then, and I got paired with guys, Jason Mead and Charlie Crittenden were their names. Great mentors of mine. Only worked with them for a year, but they had a drastic impact on me and my career. Then I worked for Zach Hayden after those guys left for Atlanta. I went to Memphis, Tennessee after that and worked at Bolton High School. Shout out to the Wildcats out in Arlington, Tennessee. One of my very best friends on this planet. I still talk to almost every day from there, from that experience. His name's David Parker. He's offensive coordinator at South Jones High School in Mississippi now. Mentors in Memphis, Tommy Miller, who works at Collierville High School. Patrick Knight was the DC that taught me the stack, which I know we'll talk a little bit more here in a little bit. I brought that back with me when I came back and I became a coach at Stonewall, ran the defense there for a few years, worked for Daryl Robinson, who's one of my favorite people I've ever worked with. Just a remarkable man in terms of the way that he had patience with kids and the way that he carried himself with grace in some tough situations. I really was impressed with, the things that he did in that regard. And then all throughout this process, especially those 3 years that I came back to Manassas at Stonewall as a coach, I was applying for head coaching jobs. And I interviewed for, I believe Brentsville was my 10th interview for a head coaching position. And, all those other ones, I would maybe make the final 2 or the final 3, and then it just didn't work out for whatever reason. But Brentsville was willing to take a shot on me, and Dr. Meintz and Coach Cameron and everybody that's a part of the faculty and admin here. It's been a blessing. I've been very fortunate. This is the longest for everybody that's listening to this. I've worked a lot of jobs in my career, which is rare. Not many people become a defensive coordinator at the age of 27 like I did. Not many people move up to be a head coach as early as I did or have that many interviews. I'm very fortunate in that way, and all those experiences led me to the opportunity to be here at Brentsville. And they had some success before I got here, but we've kind of taken that success and sustained it in a way that hasn't been done historically at the school. And it's because of coaches like Darrin, and it's other folks on my staff and the kids, most importantly. It's a team effort. But my career has really moved around a lot. This is my 4th year at Brentsville, and this is the longest I've ever been at a school now in my 4th year, which is pretty drastic when you think about it.
Well, you and I kind of have a similar experience with that because this will be my 6th year coaching overall.
Right.
My 3rd year at Brentsville, which is the longest I've been coaching at any single school. So it's very similar. So something must be going right.
No, I mean, it's going well so far. And I think that, again, the experience of it all, because to be in the top two for a job in an area that you want to live in, or, to get the opportunity to interview for a position that you never thought you'd have a chance to interview for, all those things are really exciting, especially for a younger coach. But you realize, and after the disappointment that comes from that, everything you do, every failure you have in life, every misstep, every, even if it's you did everything you could and you still didn't achieve your goal. Like my senior year at Macon, I worked out twice a day. Like it wasn't for a lack of trying that I was never a starter at Randolph-Macon College. I went into that season, my senior year, in the best shape of my life, and I still wasn't good enough. And that sounds depressing. And I tell that story to my wife, and she gets mad at Coach Arusa. Like, you couldn't let him play once. It's a lesson that I teach my kids today, our kids today, the idea that if you can control your effort and your attitude, and you do everything that you physically can and mentally can in your control to be as successful as possible, the rest takes care of itself. You either have the success you were desiring, or you have a lesson that you can take with you and apply to the next opportunity.
That was awesome, Coach. So the next question I have for you, um, if I remember correctly, I think this is a question that you asked me in our interview. Maybe,
Okay.
maybe not. You asked me a little bit about leadership style. I'm
Oh,
pretty
sure.
sure. And so I probably picked that up from you, like I do a lot of other stuff.
Oh,
Um,
shucks.
and I think if I remember correctly, I answered along the lines of, I'm not the rah-rah, out there loud yelling type of coach. And you've worked with me 3 years now.
Sure.
You know that that's not me, right?
That is not you.
I'm the relationship coach. I'm the coach on the sideline with the arm around the kid's shoulder, talking to him. If I'm yelling, there's something wrong.
Sure.
uh, so could you kind of describe your personal leadership style as a coach for the listeners?
I think that the best way that I can describe it is just being genuine. And I think that maybe is a bit of a cop out, because I know there's some people, you have the hype coach every once in a while who goes out there and they're this. And to be honest with you, I can be that guy sometimes. I believe, I vaguely remember this. We won the district championship last year on a play. It was a defensive play. They were like 20 yards away or so from the end zone, and we get a sack at the end of the game. Our linebacker spies the quarterback perfectly. It just worked out great. And everybody's celebrating. I'm pretty sure I sprinted over to the student section and like started cheering and yelling at the student section. And when we have a good player, we do stuff like that, especially defensively, I'll get pretty excited, if I'm being honest. I think that as long as you're genuine about it, it's not forced. It's in the moment. You feel that the kids can respect it. The same thing with your style, that what you just talked about, being the arm around the shoulder. Jared Shield, who's our D-line coach, is very similar in that way. That is a very legitimate way of leading young people. And I think that that's necessary as long as it's genuine. Like if that's not truly you, like if Bill Belichick tried to be what Darrin Sheffer is, or at least what we know of Bill Belichick, that would not be genuine. That would not be him truly being who he is. So in my experience with kids, every leadership style can be successful, just like every scheme can be successful. The key is to be genuine in caring about the kids. That needs to remain first and foremost in everything you do. They'll run through a brick wall for you if you're legitimate with them, you're honest with them, and you give them your most real self. If you try to be something that you're not, kids aren't dumb. They'll see through that. And, I think there's times where they need to be loved up. There's times where they need a boot to the butt and kind of pushed in a different direction. And there's times where you need to be contained. I try to do that most offensively. Like after we score a big touchdown, I'm the one just holding up the one finger on the sideline. Everybody else is hip bumping and chest bumping. I think as a head coach, especially, you need to find a balance. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that, it's better to be feared than loved. I think that there's a line that you walk. You want kids to have a healthy respect bordering on fear, because that's what your position coaches are for. Your position coaches are there to kind of love them up and say, do you understand what coach meant when he said that? That's kind of the job of the position coach. But at the same time, you want them to be willing to talk to you about anything from their mom and dad getting a divorce to a girl breaking up with them. just in the last year, I've had conversations with players about both of those things and, everything in between. So I've been very fortunate that I have kids that have bought into what we're doing here at Brentsville and have bought into me. And I don't think that that's anything special to me. I think anybody can do it as long as they're willing to be their most genuine selves in whatever pursuit they're going through as a leader. And you need to be consistent with it. If you say that you're going to do something and then you don't do it, you lose faith. Whenever I did interviews, I would have 30-page booklets talking about character and discipline and, all this stuff. The only way that it works, if it works, is because people believe that I live it. And if I don't live it, how can I expect anybody else to? So it starts with me.
I agree with the being genuine, and I respect that highly because I was the freshman head coach not too long ago at a different school, and I was a little younger, a little dumber. Not saying I'm that much smarter now, but I believed at that time period that I had to be someone that I wasn't to be a leader.
Right.
And I tried, and it was exhausting. And so I stopped trying to do that, and then I started it just was more fulfilling being myself, and so I learned that being genuine, and the kids actually start following you better when, like you said, they can see through it. So I definitely agree with that, and I can respect that.
Think back to the William Monroe game when we beat William Monroe last year.
Oh, yeah.
And our former athletic trainer, Chelsea Frascoya, sent me the video of that day. And it's me and Trey Owens, one of our young linemen, and we're having a dance battle in the locker room after a win. And I'm the worst dancer in history. Like, it's the lamest dance battle ever on my side. Like, Trey easily wins the dance battle. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what I was doing. But the fact that I'm in there with the kids and, I've built up the credit, and there's Coach Mullinax doing this, like, their reactions, like in those silly moments, in those fun times, that's the stuff you remember. Like, you don't always remember the Tuesday position group meeting when you're watching film, or, there's stuff that can be monotonous at times, but it all leads up to those moments and memories that those kids, like 20 years from now, or even 20 years long after I'm dead, they'll be at a meeting of them just like hanging out at a reunion, and they'll talk about, remember that time that Mullinax did that stupid ass dance and he made a fool of himself, and they'll remember that stuff. And that's why we do it. Every coach that's listening to this, that's why you do this. You don't do it to talk on the board for 8 hours a day about why the stack is the superior scheme. That's fun to do. I like that as a mental activity, but I'm here to work with kids, and I'm pretty sure that everybody listening to this can agree with that.
Yeah, and I've been doing, just from experience and from all of this off season, I've been doing a lot of deep dives into leadership and culture. It's all about relationships, and even as a teacher, that's how I try to do it. And so that, just what you're talking about there, it's all about relationships. So that's going to kind of lead us into this next question here I've got for you. A little bit of stats I've got written down that weren't on this on the script.
Lord. I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous. Your first season at Brentsville in 2017, this was without Coach Sheffer. You were 4-7. If I remember correctly, you were co-district champions.
Co-district champions. We were 0-6, and then we went on a 4-0 run to clinch that co-championship.
So it was kind of like a mid-season turnaround for you guys. And you had a away game for the playoffs, which you lost.
We did.
And then 2018, 6-6, and you had a home game for the playoffs, which we won.
Yes, we
did.
And
then 2019, last season, we were 8-4, Northwest District champions, and another home playoff victory. So, and just from seeing you, like from being in the program, I can tell that you're working very hard to build a positive culture at Brentsville, a positive team culture. So you've taken me along under your wing a little bit with some of these things. And so I have a personal view of some of these things too. But can you talk to the listeners a little bit about what are some things that you do in the program that you do to intentionally build a culture of excellence?
Well, I think that especially that first year, I learned a lot about. Earlier in the show, we talked about how you can't be something that you're not. And I think when I first came into Brentsville, you hear things when you get a job and you go to a new school, and you hear that programs are struggling, or in the case of Brentsville, they weren't struggling in terms of wins. They had a tremendously successful season. I think they were a 10-win team. It's pretty rare that a 10-win team's job comes open, unless they're getting a better job, I guess, the previous head coach. But in this particular case, coming in, you hear issues with behavior, you hear issues with discipline, and that sort of stuff. And I came in pretty hot. I was me, but I was like the pro wrestling version of me. I was Stone Cold Joe Mullinax, pretty much, is what I was. And it was too much. And I tried to instill a borderline dictatorship in a program where that was not the way to do it, and with a group of kids that did not respond to that. So after that sixth loss, I sat down with the seniors and we had a conversation about, what do we want this to be? What can I do to make it more what it is in terms of it being our program and not my program? And I think that was really the turning point for me, because like I said, the first 6 games of my head coaching career, I lost. So I think I'm 18-17 now as a head coach. I started 0-6. So I'm 18-11 since that point. And I'll always think of that as kind of a turning point for our program, because you mentioned the 2019 team. That was the second best season in Brentsville in this century, in the last 20 plus years, going back as far as VHSL Reference, the website we use here in Virginia, goes. There's been other good teams, but Brentsville's not a football powerhouse traditionally. So that was one of our best seasons in school history this past year. To get from that to that point, from the 0-6 meeting with those seniors, if I'm building a positive culture, it has to be built by us. It can't be built by me. And that's the lesson I learned that first year. And we've had a lot of success with it from there. I'm the guy that steers the ship, and I'm the one that has to live the culture that we're talking about, that the rest of the team is aspiring to. If I don't, as I mentioned before, it's not going to work. But it has to be a system that we build together. So the captain's applicants process that we do, where kids apply to become captains, voting's a part of it, but they have to go through leadership training with me. We do readings, we do questions and discussions. That's something that they help cultivate. It's not just me directing them and telling them what to do. They come with questions. They come with ideas for things, like what our theme every year is going to be. It's giving them ownership in the program. That's something that I've gotten advice from all sorts of people throughout my career. They're not going to buy into you if they feel like they're being dictated to and they have no say in what this is going to be. Because I'm the steward of the program. Like I said, I'm steering the ship, but this is their high school team. This is their, 4 years to represent the school that, especially in our community, their dads played for, or their uncles played for, or their grandfathers even played for. Like, we are in a very traditional community where we have the advantage of so much support from our community. And a lot of it is because it's a family tie to the school and to the program. So we here at Brentsville, as we build a culture, it's about buying into what matters, being the things that you can control, like we talked about before. The idea of physical fitness, you control that. You control how physically conditioned you are. And there are games that we won because of being in better shape than the other team. You control your preparation. And I always point to our kicking game in that way. You mentioned the 2018 playoff game. We won that game because of special teams. Like, that's why we won. They had a dominant defensive lineman that shut down our offense. They had better skill players than we did on the offensive side of the ball. And defensively, there was a couple of penalties that if they hadn't been called, we lose that game. The main reason that we were able to pull it off is we had a kicking game and they didn't. And because of that, we were able to pull out a pretty close victory in not so good conditions in terms of rain in the field and that sort of stuff. So it's buying into those little things. There are no little things. I use that quote from Brad Stevens with our kids all the time. We keep talking about little things as coaches. We talk about them so much that they're not little. There are no little things. Everything that we do matters. Everything has a purpose. That was a theme that our captain's applicants chose one year, was purpose. Everything has purpose, from the class that you attend, which of course, being student athletes, that's the most important thing, to the rep that you get in the weight room. Every rep, every set, every moment of every day matters. That doesn't mean that you have to be perfect in that moment. None of us are perfect, but everything you do needs to be with purpose. And I think that our kids buy into that more and more than they have ever before. And definitely before the pandemic happened, I thought we were really hitting our stride in terms of that buy-in to what it means to be a football player. You don't have to be at workouts 365 days a year. Brentsville has less than 1,000 kids. We want our kids to do 2 and 3 sports and be active and take advantage of the opportunities that possesses. But at the same time, you can't just show up in July and expect, we're not a football team. I tell that to our kids all the time. We're a football program, and a program's a year-round thing. Doesn't mean you have to be there year-round, because you might be doing another sport or doing other stuff. But the football program is something that goes on 24/7, 365. And again, if I don't live that, the kids don't buy into it. So I think that success obviously helps, but the fact that we have gotten groups of kids that have bought into it, that's the most important part, is getting those kids to buy into it. And it goes back to the relationships we mentioned before. Relationships are key. If you don't have good relationships with your kids, they're not going to buy into you, and it's not going to, result in the results you want. But, it really is important to get them to understand that everything matters. Everything's important. And there's nothing that they do that is a waste of time. If they buy into that within your program, you'll be amazed at how much better they get from day to day.
Definitely. And I've seen it personally. So I can definitely attest to that. The next question, we're getting to a little bit of X's and O's here, because that's what everybody wants to hear about, right?
Everybody wants to hear about that.
Everyone wants to hear about it.
Bunch of football nerds.
So you don't have to convince me of the 33 stack, because that's what I learned from you and from all my research and from experience. So you don't have to convince me. I'm already converted. Why do you believe in the 33 stack? Why do you coach it? And why did you bring it to Brentsville?
Well, first off, I won't want to say correct you. I believe in defensive scheme in general. I've told you before, and you and I argue over your beloved wing tee, single wing garbage that you like to do. And I'm sure I just pissed off half of your audience. But that's just personal preference. Like, you could go to any school in the country that runs that, and I'm sure there's at least one in every state that's won a district championship in the last year, won a state championship. Same thing with the power spread that we run at Brentsville. We're not unique. Lots of schools run what we do, and they have success. Schools struggle. It comes down to implementation. The same thing is true of defense. I was a 4-2-5 guy. My mentor, Jason Mead, who I was his Darrin, if that makes sense. I learned a lot 4-2-5 wise. That was my preferred defense. But then I got into schools like at Bolton, where the stack was the way to go because of the personnel you had. And if you don't have a bunch of big kids and you want to prioritize speed and you want to prioritize the ability to get the edge and keep it, and you want to defend the spread offense, the stack defense, in my opinion, is the best way to do that. Now, when you come up against power offenses like the wing tee or the single wing or whatever, type of power runs scheme you have, the stack isn't ideal, and that's where I won't say that I'm a stack guy. I've sat in clinics before and I've listened to people say, here's how you defend it with the wing tee. I don't see the value in that personally. Doesn't mean that it can't work. It just means that for me, in my system, we're going to be a multiple defensive front. And we've installed schemes against those particular offenses that aren't that different from what we do in the stack for the kids. But me and you and, Jared Scheel, our defensive coaches, we sit down and we say, okay, how do we redo this and make it as easy for the kids as possible? The reason that I like the stack is because of personnel. You're able to get as much speed on the field as possible. When I was at Bolton in Memphis, we had 3 D linemen that were all district. We had a nose tackle that, against a single wing team, because my mentor in Memphis ran the stack no matter what. We had a nose guard that had 20 tackles, just kept tackling the fullback dive. Every time it was him. They weren't able to block him. It's about speed. It's about attacking gaps and not a man. At Brentsville, if we're going to have a line that averages 200 pounds and we're going up against a team that has an average of 300-pound linemen, why the hell am I going to teach a kid to attack a 300-pound lineman? That doesn't make any sense. He's going to get his ass kicked. So he needs to shoot the gaps. He needs to attack space, not the man. In the stack, it prioritizes the box principle. You have a linebacker outside. In our scheme, it's the buck. who sets the edge, and that's his primary responsibility. He may not have as many tackles as our Mike does, the counting stats, but I'll point to our buck linebacker every year that I've run this defense as arguably the most important player in our scheme because he keeps everything inside. You get the edge on me, I'm screwed. I need somebody that is going to keep that edge because we're a primary cover 3 team. Our corners don't have that, their secondary edge only when we're in cover 2, really. So I think for the stack, it's about speed. It's about being able to adapt and adjust. People make fun of me for all the different checks I have and hand gestures because we're no huddle, which is fair. I do look pretty ridiculous at times, but it's fluid. It's Bruce Lee's be like water in a football sense. It's an ability to move around to whatever the offense is trying to do to you. You can go from a 6-2 front to a 5-3 front to a 4-4 to a 3-5 all within 2 or 3 plays, sometimes within a play, depending on the way that an offense motions. There's different ways within our scheme that we can move around and adapt and adjust to whatever the offense is trying to do. It's a lot harder to do when you have 4 guys' hands in the ground. It's a lot easier to do when you have one more guy upright being able to move around. So I'm not quite to the level of the guys that do the 2-4-5 and the 1-5-5. I see some innovative stuff that if you have the horses that can, engage into somebody and they have the hip strength and that sort of stuff to not have to be down on the ground, I think 3 is kind of the minimum for me that I'm comfortable with. But in terms of blitzing, there's so many different types of blitzes that you can do in the 3-3 stack. It's really a Rolodex of chaos that you can conduct. And I think our scheme, over the last 3 years, especially at Brentsville, we've had some defenses that were dominant. Your first year at Brentsville, my second year, that was a dominant defense, probably the best defense the school has maybe ever had. Last year, the defense wasn't as strong, but our offense was really good, and we were able to stay in games because of that. Every year is different, and you need to kind of adapt and adjust to your scheme. And this coming season is going to be a great example of that because I just spent this whole time talking about how we didn't have enough size. And this coming year is going to be the biggest defensive line we've ever had at Brentsville, at least since I've been there. So maybe we go back to my 4-2-5 roots, which I did a little bit more at Stonewall when I had Tim Settle, who's playing for the Washington football team now, and kids like that. We did a little more 4-2-5. We still ran stack, but we did some 4-2-5 stuff because we had the personnel. Here, we do it out of necessity against those power offenses. But if you can control 4 gaps with 4 guys and keep bodies off of your linebackers, obviously, that makes a lot of sense logistically too. So we have some decisions to make defensively. The main point is I like the stack for all the reasons I just outlined, but I'm not married to it in the way that a wing T guy might be or a single wing guy might be. I think you have to be malleable. You have to be able to move, and that's the reason I like the stack so much. But as personnel dictates, you should be willing to maneuver and adjust and adapt your scheme.
All right. So you are also the defensive coordinator here.
True.
And again, took me under your wing, taught me how a defensive coordinator thinks, how they game plan. And, I will never be upset anymore that I was on the defensive side of the ball because now that I was on the defense and I'm now on offense as the offensive line coach, I see things from a different viewpoint now.
Right.
And so I think it makes me a better offensive coach. And I will always tell offensive coaches, if you haven't coached defense, go do it because you'll learn so much more.
Of course.
As the defensive coordinator, how do you organize defensive practice to get the most out of your time?
Sure. Well, I think that it's important to not be in anything too long, especially with high school kids. You lose their attentiveness. I think individual is important, especially early in the season. You have to teach technique. You have to, if you want them to properly execute block destruction, you have to give them multiple tools in their tool belt to be able to do so. If you want to teach them how to wrong arm a trap block, on the defensive line, that's where I started as a position coach, was on the defensive line. You have to spend the time to teach that. And again, as I said earlier, coaches are teachers first and foremost. I teach football. I believe in the value of individual, regardless of what position it is. You need to be able to take those lessons and apply it to the quiz or the test that is team, inside run, that sort of stuff. I purposely, when I get into those team periods, I put my defense, and I try to do it to our offense too, to an extent as a head coach now. I want to put them in as adverse a situation as possible. I'll script practice. Literally every rep of practice is scripted. And there's times that I'll script it to where I know the offense is going to score. Like if the kid catches it, he's going to score a touchdown because I know what the defense is going to do. If it's a mesh concept and my linebacker and corner the previous week, we do level. We don't switch in our scheme. So if they're not leveling properly, I know they're going to run into each other, and I know that he's going to be wide open, and I know he's going to score a touchdown. I want the offense to score. I want the scouts to score. A, because I can piss off my defensive team and, have a coach kind of talk up the offense and get them, fire under them a little bit. But B, it's a teachable moment because they're going to have adversity in a game. It's not going to be perfect. I know there's some coaches that like to scheme everything up to, I'm going to have the perfect call against this and, oh, look at how smart I am. I mean, I'm not going to have a pissing match with myself. I know what my kids need and I know what our team needs. And I'm going to try to take it and make practice a learning tool. Same thing with 7-on-7 tournaments. In the off season for us now, I know there's some schools that are in, but in Virginia, we're not playing. If there's a 7-on-7 that we're doing, I don't care if we win the 7-on-7. There's been 0-10 teams that have won 7-on-7 tournaments. It's not real football. It's a learning tool. And 7-on-7 in practice is the exact same thing. I don't necessarily care if we get an interception in 7-on-7 or if they score a touchdown. Did you execute the call properly? Did you play the technique properly the way that you were taught in inside run or in individual drill, excuse me. So it all carries into team. How aggressive are you when we have those 5 or 10 minutes of live? We don't do as much live as we did in the past, but I do still think there's value in going live, especially for young kids, so they get that feel, even if it's just for 5 plays. They get the feel of what that live contact should feel like, and then you can go thud or some other tempo of the rest of the period. But, it all kind of builds up. You start in Indy and you build to the group periods and you build the team. I think that makes sense. And you work your special teams in between practice, just like you would have in between a game. There's a punt in the middle of a game between offensive and defensive sessions. We do the same thing here at Brentsville in terms of practice structure. So I think it's important to keep them moving. I'm sure every coach that's been on here talks about that. But it's also important to teach. I've been a part of programs where you just try to get as many reps as possible and you teach later. I think quality matters more than quantity. And I tell our coaches, this, Darrin, there's something to coach every single play. Every single rep, there's something to say, even if it's positive. If your quarterback makes a perfect read and he throws a perfect ball, you love that kid up and you take 10 seconds to say that's a hell of a job. I'm really impressed with the way you looked off that safety. You even if it's in a positive manner, there's always something to coach up and develop. And I would rather do that over the span of a 15 or 20 minute team period, get 15 to 20 plays in, than get 40 plays and have muscle memory be in a negative fashion because they're doing things wrong and you plan on coaching it up the next day in film session. We don't have that time at the high school level. We need to teach now. And that's the way I really approach our practice schedule.
All right, so let's go to game planning specifically as a defense. So when we're game planning for an opponent, what are some things that you look for specifically to prepare for during that weeks of practice?
Well, we just talked about how we don't have a ton of time at the high school level. So for me, especially as we get deeper into the season, like there's a lot of coaches that are, getting towards the ends of their seasons here in the next few weeks. If it's a formation or if it's something that they've seen before, they've played before, I will maybe briefly mention it. Even if it's something that they run a lot, I'll use an example of like a counter play. If we are playing a team in week 8 that ran a very similar play in week 1, I might say, hey, remember when we played against Liberty and they ran this play? Look, here it is again. And I'll just briefly review what they do, but they should, again, from the reps from that previous week, they should be fine. I really try to focus on formations because I think a lot of defensive football is formation adjustment. 50% of it is just being in the right spot and you play ball from there. If you're out of position, you're outflanked, you're dead. And that, has held true for us at Brentsville a good bit these last few years. A lot of times whenever we give up a big play, it's not because the other team was that much better than us. It's because we messed up mentally and we had a mental lapse. So I do a lot of formation recognition, trying to make sure that they understand where they're supposed to be. We do a lot of that on the field. where they physically move around and get into those spots, especially on walkthroughs on Mondays and Thursdays. We review formation alignment. And then we also do a lot of game planning in terms of understanding what they're trying to do to you. You and I have had disagreements on this a little bit in the past. The keep it simple, stupid's fine. But I believe that they're going to rise to the level of their training too. So if I'm willing as a teacher to put them in a spot where I can help them understand why we're doing what we're doing, they'll execute it better. So they'll fall to the level of their training in a way in terms of the adversity. That's a famous way of looking at it. But they'll also rise to it in terms of if they truly make a connection with the scheme and how we're attacking an opponent, they'll be able to better execute it because they see it. They're not just being told what to do. They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And they attack it. Our Tiger safety last year, Yuri Smaltz, is a great example of that. He understood how we wanted him to come off the edge, and he's one of the best I've ever had at doing it. He directly impacted games because of his ability to buy into that position and the pressure that we brought from it. So when it comes to game planning, I'm looking at what they do well. How do I slow them down? How do I get pressure on their quarterback? Because I like to think I'm a smart guy, but I also know that there's a lot of other smart people and people that are smarter than me that are in this line of work. I trust my ability to confuse and throw off a 15 or 16 or 17-year-old kid at quarterback than I do my ability to consistently out chess piece, the opposing offensive coordinator. So I'm looking for ways to disguise coverages, roll coverages, bring different types of pressure, do things alignment-wise that they haven't seen before so that they have confusion on their end and our pressures and our line movements can hit a little bit cleaner.
Good stuff, Coach. Yeah, we have had some disagreements in the past, I'll admit. Now, this is one I'm interested to see what you say because I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question.
Okay.
If you had to choose an offense that you hate to prepare for,
yeah,
which one would you choose and why? I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
But I want to hear what you say.
It's because I know there's differentiations of it. So I want to make sure, especially on this podcast hosted by you, that I say it properly. I hate preparing for the single wing the most, which is an offense that a school that's on our schedule or was on our schedule, Spotsylvania runs. The wing T, to me, at least there's multiple levels to it. The single wing is just like 3 or 4 plays, and it's just so frustrating when they work. Like, again, I think they scored 30 on us last year, and they ran for 300 yards without their best player. And it was super frustrating because we were in spots. We weren't aligning poorly. I think we coached them well. We had a good game plan in place, and they just executed it. But it goes back to what we were talking about before. Like, I might hate the single wing, and I do vehemently hate it. But it's successful. Like, it doesn't mean that it can't work. And those kids, to the credit of coach down there at Spotsy and that staff, those kids buy into it. And that's not easy in 2020 to buy into an offense like that when you're watching Mississippi State beat LSU, which I know looks a little bit inflated now. But you watch that first week of the season, and kids are throwing for 600 yards. They want to be Patrick Mahomes. They don't want to run the single wing. And, to have a program buy into that, that's impressive. And they're very good at it. And there's schools across the country that are very good at it. So I hate preparing for that offense because I feel like you can have as good of a plan in place as you want, and it doesn't necessarily matter because they're going to get 2 to 3 yards every time, regardless of what you do. And I know that's the single wing mantra. If you get 3 or 4 yards in a cloud of dust every time, it's a first down after 4 plays. And, you control clock and all that stuff. So I think that this past year we were able offensively to be a bit more explosive with what we do, and there was a big turnover that we forced that helped us get the win. That was kind of the turning point in the game because our offense wasn't stopped by their defense either. It wasn't a good night for the defenses. But it's a situation where when you're going against the single wing, no matter what scheme you implement, if you don't have linemen that can consistently win the battle at the line of scrimmage, they're going to get yardage every time. And it's extremely difficult. The deception of the stack doesn't work. You go 4 or 5 man front, which makes sense against that scheme. But if it's down blocks and pools, and it doesn't matter if you can't get through those blocks. And a lot of times those single wings, especially with their alignments, it's extremely difficult to do that unless you have horses up front that are just able to win their one-on-one battles.
I remember being on the sideline for that game and how frustrated we were as a defensive coach.
I'm pretty
I
sure
mean,
I just openly said, tell me what I should do. Like,
yeah,
what else am I supposed to do? We tried the stack. We tried our 4-2-5 look. We tried our eagle look, which is a defense that we have designed specifically for that type of offense. Nothing was working that night. And there's times where you tip your cap to the opposing team, and they just had the better offense compared to our defense. But thankfully, our offense was a little bit better, and we were able to get the win.
if I remember correctly, the week before that game, our offense did not do well at all. And then this game was when I think this was the turning point for offense that last season, is when they started to become extremely explosive. And yards and yards and yards, especially at the quarterback position, which we really didn't mention today. But that's probably a whole podcast in itself, talking about running the quarterback.
So, yeah, you can bring me back on for talking about that.
Oh yeah, we got to talk power spread.
Yeah, I do love the power spread.
I mean, so do I. You remember my old blog was obsessed with offense. I talk about all offenses.
That's true.
So I won't keep you on for too long. I got one more question for you, and you kind of mentioned a little bit in the first question when you talked about interviewing. What are some things that you look for when you're trying to hire a new coach? When you're in the interview process, what are you looking for?
First and foremost, they need to be a teacher. And I don't mean like a literal teacher. We obviously have coaches on our staff that aren't, in a school building working with kids or virtually right now, like we are here in Virginia, working with kids. They need to be able to teach their position, the game of football, how it connects to life. That's the biggest draw for me to football is there's so many lessons that it can teach you when you face adversity in life, or you face a problem, you face a situation where you don't know what to do. You can point to something that happened to you in your football career, and it can help you get through that time. I truly believe that. That's the reason I do what I do, is I believe in football as a tool to teach young people how to cope with the ups and downs of life. But I think when it comes to hiring a coach, it's about teaching. It's about caring for the kids. How involved do they want to be with the school itself? I think that matters. You can't just show up and leave and, expect the kids to care. You got to be there at their wrestling matches. You got to be there at their basketball games, their track events, their baseball games. You need to get to know their families. You need to be in a place where you're invested. I'm looking for investment. I'm not an alumni of Brentsville District High School, but there are very few people that I would say that care as much about this community as me, in terms of wanting it to get better, and wanting to see it grow, and how I can be a positive force for that. And I want coaches that are going to do that and want to be a part of that. I want coaches that are not going to be yes men. I tell you guys in our yearly meeting every year, I don't know what your rating on this podcast is. You can call me an a-hole in a meeting. You can disagree with me vehemently. You can say that I'm dead wrong, and here's why. And you might be right that I'm dead wrong. But I'm the guy who's sitting in the captain's chair. I'm the one that gets interviewed at the end of the game, whether something works or not. It's me that has my name attached to these wins and losses. If we weren't as successful and Coach Sheffer wanted to become an offensive coordinator somewhere else, you could do that, and the record wouldn't necessarily taint you as much as it would me. So at the end of the day, I'm going to make the decision. And whether you agree or disagree with it, the most important job of an assistant, outside of being that counter for the coach, and emotionally, is to be an extension of the coach in those position rooms and explaining the logic behind it, even if you don't agree with it. Because I know there's things, Darrin, that I've done that you don't agree with, but you have to be something of an extension of here is why. Being able to argue and explain to kids, to parents. We have coaches on our staff that are members of this community more than me. Like, they're around this community almost every day because they have kids in the school. One of our coaches who you're taking over for full time is one of the best football players in this school's history, Matt Cornwell. Troy Hayes, my offensive coordinator, played quarterback here. Travis Stanley played here at Brentsville. A lot of our offensive staff is former Brentsville athletes who are very active in the Nokesville community. I need to be able to trust that when they're out there, they may not agree with everything I do. I don't expect them to. I expect them to say, here's why we're doing it this way. And this is the reason that we're going to continue to do it this way. And they need to have trust that I'm going to legitimately hear them out in those meetings. It's a two-way street. I can't make it so that it's a dictatorship. Like I talked about that first year at Brentsville, it was pretty close to a dictatorship, and I almost lost the kids and the coaches because of it. So it's about getting coaches to buy in, like it's about getting kids to buy in. But at the same time, when it comes to a coach, obviously there's a more professional aspect to it. And I think that the key job of an assistant, because I did it for years as an assistant myself, is to support the head coach. And whatever the head coach says is what is being done. But it has to be an extension that I've added to it in my 3 years, now 4 years at Brentsville, is you have to allow coaches the ability to say what they want to say in those closed door meetings. And I think that the bravery, maybe that's a little too strong of a word, but the understanding that it's okay to do that and the willingness to put themselves out there is something else that I'm looking for coaches to do as well. Like, I appreciate all the nice things you've said about me. It means a lot to me. I want you to be comfortable enough to say, Joe, I think you're dead wrong on this, and here's why. I explain my side and why we're going to do it the way I want to. Or, and this has happened before too, I say, Darrin, you're right. Let's do it that way. Let's give that a shot and see how it looks. And that earns credit for those times when you say, I disagree with this completely, but I know Joe hears me out. Here's why we do it this way. Offensive line, let's do the best we can with it.
Hey, listeners, don't worry. I do disagree with Coach quite a bit.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that's important to understand. Like, I'm not perfect. I made the joke about you can't hire Lombardi if he doesn't apply. I'm not Lombardi. Like, I'm not the best coach in the world or in the state or in the county, probably. I am in a constant pursuit of improving myself, and I can't control what other coaches do. I can't control how they carry themselves or what level of football intelligence they have, or all I can control is the kind of coach and the kind of person, the kind of man that I am for this program. Just like I can only control the kind of husband I am for my wife and the kind of father I am for my kids. And I do my best. I'm not perfect, but I do my best to prioritize what can I do to make myself better. And in that process, I help our program that I've been given the opportunity to lead. I put them in a better position to be successful by doing so. And I think that's important to understand. Nobody knows every answer. I've made plenty of mistakes. It's about learning from them and growing and being better the next time those situations come around.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate you coming on. And yeah, we're going to have to do at least another one, if not more.
Sure. Well, I understand. I'm not very popular. You've had some big time guests like the UVA offensive line. You're a big deal, Coach Sheffer. So I get it. You got to build up the podcast first, and then you bring on the lower level guests like me. I get it.
Lower level.
Lower level guests.
Okay. Whatever you say, Coach. All right. All right. Well, listeners, this has been Coach Sheffer, and we are signing off.